with our Igniting Hope podcast. The Igniting Hope podcast is part of our work at the Buffalo Center for Health Equity to really to raise awareness. Our mission at the Buffalo Center for Health Equity is to eliminate race-based health disparities in this region. And we really focus on the social determinants of health. So there are going to be times on our podcast that we're going to talk directly about healthcare and health services, but mostly we're also going to talk a lot about what's going on in our society and how the things that happen outside of the healthcare system, how they impact health outcomes for us in this region. Today, we're going to have a special conversation today with a good friend of mine who has done some really significant things for our community and our society. And we really want to talk about the life lesson that we learned from some of the choices that my friend has made, and how we can challenge ourselves to uh, break the silence. See, one of the things that happens in our society is that there are people who make the right choice, and they'll be in positions of leadership, and they'll lead their organizations, or their they'll be in a governmental position, and they'll lead it justly, and they'll do the right thing. And then there are others that will be in positions to have influence over other people's lives, and they abuse that. They take advantage of the vulnerable. And so oftentimes we focus upon the bad actions of bad actors, but the bad actions of bad actors are often enabled by the silence of people who are witnesses to these bad actions. But these bad actions may not directly impact them, but they'll impact others. And instead of speaking out and saying the things that uh, they need to say, they often remain silent. And your silence can be complicity to injustice. There's a great theologian named Walter Brueggemann, and Walter Brueggemann talks a lot about the moral choices that people who call themselves faithful make in their day-to-day lives. And one of the things that one of his books called Interrupting Silence, he talks about how often faithful people will remain silent in the midst of injustice, and makes some connections into the sacred text, a biblical narrative, not in a proselytizing way, but talking about it in terms of the human experience. And Brueggemann says this in his book. He says, humanness depends on being faithfully heard. And being faithfully heard depends on risky speech of self-disclosure uttered in freedom before a faithful listener. So when our psalmist dared to speak, he came to know the name of that faithful listener. And so how often do we on our journey speak faithfully? How often do we, when we see things that are wrong, whether they be big or whether they be small, how many times do we lift up our voices and interrupt the silence that enables or causes systemic oppression and systemic injustice to continue? It's really not just the actions of the people who we may want to call them wicked, or evil, or mean, or whatever term you want to use, but they're enabled. They're only able to operate with this kind of unjust rule because there's many people who are witnesses to these things and remain silent. So if we're ever going to get to the point where we want to create a just society, or as King talked about, the beloved community, it's going to require the activism of people who want to change society and make society more just. And it's also going to take the interrupting or the breaking of the silences of those who are witnesses to injustice, and they have to begin to speak out. Back in October of this year, I was looking at the Buffalo News, and to my great surprise, but also to my great joy, I saw my friend Peter Rizzo, who was on the front page, and it talked about his recognition of getting an award from the U.S. Office of Special Counsel in the Outstanding Public Servant Award. Now, I'd known Peter for a little while. We'd come together on working on a project at the St. Luke's Mission, which we'll talk a little bit about as well. And I remember a conversation that we had before one of those meetings, and he pulled me aside and he said, "Pastor, I need to talk to you about something." And he shared with me about a story of a place in which he was employed and a very good job. And Peter is a husband and has children and has responsibilities like many of us have. And he was just burdened by uh, what he had witnessed in the place that he was employed, and was struggling with, what do I do about it? And um, my counsel to him was to follow your conscience. You have to. All of us has a level of consciousness, a level of our own spirituality. We're not talking about religion, but our in our human experience, we all have a consciousness that gives us a kind of a barometer of what we believe to be right and what is wrong. And some of us can easily just see things that are not right and just go about our days. And that doesn't make you a bad human being. I think it makes you an incomplete human being, but or as a human being that's not fully embracing your entire humanness. But then there are others who when they see something that's wrong, or experience something that's wrong, or become aware of something that's wrong, they're burdened by it. They feel like they have to do something, and that choice of doing something can often have great consequences. So I want to bring into a conversation our good friend of mine, Peter Rizzo, and Peter is currently working as the director of construction initiatives for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. But before we get into all that, I wanted to Peter just to share a little bit about the idea of interrupting silence in the midst of injustice. So, um, just kind of share with you a little bit, and with those who are listening and watching to our Igniting Hope podcast, um, about that notion of interrupting silence and speaking up in the midst of injustice.
Certainly, I really appreciate you having me, and I'm so happy to join you today. It is, I feel that it's incumbent upon us as members of society to be willing to step out and to speak out on issues that are of concern to us and things that we notice that are wrong. It doesn't mean being um, incredibly disruptive or being objectionable to everything that we face, but selectively identifying issues that are of concern and figuring out ways to solve those problems productively. It's one thing to complain about something or to call attention to something, but it is another thing entirely separate to develop a solution and to productively communicate that solution to the greater society in a way that yields actionable change and actionable opportunity, I guess, to facilitate improvement. And I think throughout my professional career, there have been there's been one episode after another, just in my work life, but outside of that, especially, where I've identified situations and come across situations, as we all do, where we see injustice, we see things that um, are, are are wrong. People who are acting in a way that is counterintuitive, that does not, they're acting in ways that don't match what's coming out of their mouth,
Hmm.
essentially. And when you begin to peel that onion and really see all of the layers and everything that is inside that is motivating those actions, you appreciate the unfortunate reality that, of course, not everyone is acting in the best interest of the public.
Hmm.
So I'm a
Hmm.
certified planner, and that's one of the major tenets of the credential that I hold. It is making decisions that are in the best interest of the public. And I think we can all take that to heart and think about ways that that applies to our lives in every facet. The, acting in the best interest not of ourselves
Hmm.
but of society.
So how'd you make the front page of the paper? So a lot of us, so a lot of times people in our daily lives, we might make those decisions to do the right thing, and many oftentimes they can go unnoticed, which is okay. But then sometimes there's big things. There were some big decisions that you had to make, and so can you kind of share a little bit about how the 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 end result became you getting this award from the United States Office of Special Counsel, which is a nonpartisan, high level. It's a national award, right? And
Correct.
um, so what did you do that would get this level of recognition and that it would be highlighted on the front page of the Sunday paper?
Sure. So this is not the most attractive uh, concern that I've come across in my career, but I was working at the Department of Veterans Affairs at the time, and I discovered that a system of record that was used by VA, which serves many, many hundreds of thousands of millions of veterans nationwide, and has 400,000 plus employees. The system of records, electronic system of records they were using to take in correspondence from members of Congress, from veterans, from veteran service organizations, as well as internal communications, interdepartmental and intra-departmental communications, were housed in an electronic system that was not secure. And you had personal health information that was available to anyone with access to the system, social security numbers, addresses, home phone numbers, um, intimate details about individuals that were not protected in any way, shape, or form. And so this discovery happened in June and July of 2022. And I had reached out to a couple of colleagues and shared with them what I had discovered. And they were equally concerned by this because you never want to go at this stuff alone.
Hmm.
I think that's really an important feature of and theme throughout all these episodes. Don't just you see something that's a potential injustice, make sure that you verify that with others who are in the know and you're not just listening to your own story. We can all tell ourselves a story
Mm.
and then go down a rabbit hole. But seek out objective listeners and get their feedback as you mentioned I had done earlier. So in doing that, we banded together as a group and reached out within the VA to find solutions to this. And leadership was not interested in any way, shape, or form, which forced us to go outside of VA and reach out to the U.S. Office of Special Counsel, which is a federal agency dedicated to accepting whistleblower disclosures, so wrongdoing throughout the federal government. They are there to be a friendly ear and to take consideration of concerns of other federal employees or the public in wrongdoing by government agencies, as well as accept whistleblower retaliation cases. So, in the event that you disclosed wrongdoing up the chain of command in your agency, and or as a citizen seeking services of a federal agency, and were the victim of retaliation. Let's say you apply for a job and were not hired, and that was based on that was a retaliatory act. You can pursue justice through this organization, staffed with attorneys. And so we went out to them. They reviewed all the evidence we had gathered, and within a matter of weeks had concluded that there was a substantial likelihood of wrongdoing by VA, meaning that they were violating their own policies and procedures in freely allowing access to personal information within the system.
And what kind of impact could that have had upon the lives of the veterans?
Well, we actually don't know what impact it did have
Hmm.
because VA didn't want to study that.
Okay.
But the impact it could have had was very easily identity theft,
Okay.
first and foremost, not only on veterans, but also facilitating retaliation on the part of whistleblowers. Because whistleblower disclosures were captured in the system. They could be viewed by leadership at VA, and now they know who made the disclosure, what the disclosure was about, who they
Hmm.
were accusing of wrongdoing,
Hmm.
and that just paves the way for retaliation at
Hmm.
the agency that has the highest rate of retaliation of any federal agency.
Hmm.
So altogether, a major, major problem internally. It took 2 years and 2 months before we reached a conclusion in this case. Many iterations of investigations went back and forth, and ultimately, VA conceded, acknowledging, in fact, that the system was not operating in the manner it should have been, that there were major security flaws, and making a commitment and taking actual steps before the report was finally sent to the president to secure the data that's inside that system. And so today it's in a much better, more secure operating mode.
Hmm.
And it's because of the work of myself and my two former colleagues at VA. And we're grateful for that.
So, so, so that's a lesson to us that again, um, there are people, veterans, who are very vulnerable. Many who are very vulnerable. We're living in a technological age where there's a high level of cybercrime and identity theft, and so here was an occurrence where the veterans in this system who's who had the potential of having something very negative happen to their lives for no fault of their own, because their systems weren't in place to protect their information, their data, whatever. And so there was a choice that Peter said, well, you know what, that's on them. They got to deal with that. Or I could speak up, not to hurt anybody, not to, we use the term drop a dime on somebody. No, but if we don't do that, then the system will continue to chug along in the way that it does. And maybe we'll never understand or see the error within the system until something catastrophic happens and then a number of people are hurt. So one of the things, Peter, and to our listening audience here is, and how is this connected to what we do here at the Buffalo Center for Health Equity? Well, in a number of ways. One, in the clearest way is, and we're going to get back to why you were on the front page of paper. The VA piece was the reason why the Office of Special Counsel gave you an award, but then the Buffalo News tied that into something else that is directly connected to the social determinants of health. We believe here at the Buffalo Center for Health Equity that there are 5 things that really need to be addressed in order for us to bring health equity. One is, bringing every child up to level of their math and reading within the schools. Uh, Two, making sure everybody in community has at their maximum level of employment, from unemployment to employment to getting higher skills to get higher income. Uh, Three would be uh, access to healthy food, food access. We know the connection between health and what you eat and your health outcomes. Another one would be number 4 would be um, access to primary care. We know that your health outcomes are dramatically improved if you have a good relationship with a primary care physician. And the last one, and they're not in any particular order because they're all interlocked, they're all connected, is housing. And through the work of Dr. Henry Lewis Taylor, and in collaboration with us at the center, we, in his report, The Harder We Run, it documents that on the east side of Buffalo, where 80% or so African Americans live, there is a housing crisis. And it's a housing crisis related to affordability, it's a housing crisis related to quality of housing. And so, housing or access to housing or being able to live in quality housing is a social determinant of health. It impacts your health outcome. That's clear. And so one of the things that creates a problem for many in the African American community to getting access to housing are discriminatory practices, from and we know them historically redlining, blockbusting, all these other things that have been kind of baked into our country in terms of housing policies, access to housing, um, practices by private companies in terms of making housing available to all people. And when those things occur, again, they're something that they don't happen in a vacuum. People, somebody sees it, right? They, if you know, like if you work for a company and they do real estate or do something, and you know that they have practices that don't, you know, that aren't equitable, and even though there's laws that are in place, the practices still happen. So in the article of in the Buffalo News, in the October 13th edition, it talked about Peter Rizzo. Rizzo gets award, and then for VA and Clover Management, right? And so, can you share a little bit about the choice that you had to make and it's all documented, and so the choices that you had to make in terms of in your professional life and being a witness to something that was discriminatory, and just tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I think generally speaking, as I mentioned earlier, there are moments in our lives when we are faced with we reach a decision point, and it is incumbent upon us to kind of ground ourselves in reality and consider what is right, what is wrong, what we know to be right, what we believe to be right. Again, talking with others and consulting with them. And I think, generally speaking, the matter of housing discrimination and housing issues in the city of Buffalo, especially, are of paramount concern. And I want to jump back to the Christmas blizzard that we had, where 47 people total died, 46 in Erie County, and that's at least
Hmm.
that number of people
Hmm.
passed. Families, people froze to death in their own homes. Why? Because older homes do not have insulation between the walls, plain and simple. And so you have large areas of the city of Buffalo without power for days. You have families who are hunkered together on their couch or in bed, trying to stay warm, using their body heat as the only method to keep warm. And people who ventured out into this to obtain food who could not make it back because they couldn't see where they were going. But again, going back to the folks at home, it's just incredible to think that the safest place that you should be at your house in a disaster situation was the worst place to be.
Mm.
And our housing stock in the city of Buffalo and the way that so I'm involved in St. Luke's, you are as
Mm.
well, and you go to visit St. Luke's and there's pothole after pothole, sidewalks cracked and missing, corners busted up. It's the disinvestment in the east side of Buffalo is incredible. You go to other communities where we're repaving streets, other parts of Buffalo where we've repaved streets that don't need to be repaved. It is it's a systemic issue. It touches all facets of life, including housing development and investment. And although I can't speak to specific issues on this topic, what's public is public. I It's incumbent upon all of us to pay attention to these issues and to see them for what they are and to be thoughtful about addressing them and and invite people to the table, invite conversations and opportunities, because people will talk to you about this, and you bring to bear recommendations for changes and opportunities to make improvements, and you might be successful and you might not. It is a very um, complex challenge, but something that guides me, and it's mentioned in this article, is this notion of doing the right thing for the right reasons. there's a lot of ways to do the right thing for the wrong reasons, and that's up to you and in your heart. But when you see something wrong and you decide to take action, don't do it because you're trying to go after somebody. That's not the right. That's not what our faiths. Whether you're religious or not, it's not who we are called to be as people, as members of
Hmm.
society.
Hmm.
You do the right thing for the right reasons because it's the right thing to do
Right.
for our fellow human beings. I'm I'm troubled by where society is heading, um, but then I'm also optimistic about the opportunities that exist and what we're seeing, the issues that young people are caring about. So I speak at UB in the law school as well as in the philosophy, politics, and economics program annually. And what we talk about are ways that individuals can make a difference in their community.
Hmm.
Um, One of the common themes or that are of most interest are speed cameras, the issue of speed cameras in the
Right.
city of Buffalo,
Right.
which I think is actually how we first met.
Right. Right. Right.
So in I think it was in 2019, late 2019,
Right.
we had an announcement by the mayor of Buffalo that speed cameras were going to be put up in select locations at specific schools
Right.
throughout the city. And that the reason for this was to reduce school zone accidents,
Right.
reduce school zone crashes.
Hmm.
And many people took that at face value.
Hmm.
It is what it is. It's what the city is doing. I'm a parent. I have a child in a public school. Arguably, I would think this is a great idea. It's a good approach. But then I began to look at where these cameras were placed. And as
Hmm.
an urban planner, I know the city of Buffalo. I know where those pockets of poverty are, large
Hmm.
swaths of
Right.
poverty.
Right.
I know where we have concentrations of black and brown people, where we have concentrations of affluent individuals. And I saw the disparity that existed plain and simple on a map.
Hmm.
This was unusual
Right. Or usual.
or usual, right? Well, it was
Yeah.
unusual.
Yeah.
It was, here's what it was. It was
For
inconsistent.
some of us, it was predictable and usual. But go ahead.
Right. I'm trying to give people the most credit, but it turned out that they deserve no credit at
Right.
all. In
Right.
fact, the unusual thing about it was that people were complacent,
Hmm.
initially at least, in believing that, in fact, this was to reduce school zone crashes. So, seeing where those were located, I decided to ask the question, is our school zone crashes a problem?
Right.
So, I submitted a FOIL request to the City of Buffalo Police Department, and I obtained 911 data for uh, car crashes that are within a quarter mile of each school in the City of Buffalo. I also asked for pedestrian crashes in the City of Buffalo. And what I discovered was, in fact, school zone crashes were not of significance in the city. And in fact, the locations that these cameras were placed were not at schools that had the highest crash rates.
Hmm.
They were placed at schools that had the highest traffic counts.
Hmm.
And to boot, the city put up cameras to fine people $50 per violation
Hmm.
and failed to stripe crosswalks.
Hmm.
I mean, that's the most basic element
Hmm.
of pedestrian safety is striping a crosswalk. And in fact, at most of these schools, if not all of them, that they had not been striped in years. So what remnants existed could not justifiably be seen by a passing motorist. And so in I prepared an analysis. I worked with Michael Wooten, now of WKBW, and we presented on television this case
Hmm.
for addressing or kind of exposing what is actually happening here.
Mm-hmm.
Michael took it very seriously, got the word out. The very next day, I presented the same data to the Buffalo Common Council's legislative committee. They were aghast by this
Mm-hmm.
information, and it took off. I wasn't attacking anyone in pointing this out. In
Mm-hmm.
fact, I'd never ventured a guess to say that this was a money grab.
Mm-hmm.
That was not a feature of my argument. It was, we have an issue at hand where we've instituted a punitive enforcement mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
We have targeted the poorest communities in the city of Buffalo. Some areas that had a median household income of $12,000,
Mm-hmm.
$12,000 a year,
Mm-hmm.
$1,000 a month. How, you
Mm-hmm.
can't make ends meet
Right. Right.
at that rate. And we're putting cameras up in those areas. And the response from the city was, well, the people who live in the neighborhoods they'll figure out where the cameras are and they'll know to avoid them or they'll slow down.
Right.
But then we did a subsequent study very shortly
Mm-hmm.
after this was released, and we discovered that unpaid, first of all, the areas that had the highest citations were the neighborhoods around the cameras. And number two, the areas that had the lowest rate of payment,
Mm-hmm.
the most outstanding and overdue, were those poor communities.
Right.
So we definitely were targeting those
Right.
areas and subjecting our fellow citizens who can't afford. It's a $50 fine. That's the difference between putting food on your table or
Right.
not.
Right.
We can't do that to one another.
Right. Right. And then those are areas with some of the worst health outcomes as well.
Correct.
Right. Right.
Correct.
And so the process of, again, seeing something that's not right, unjust, and then taking an action, doing something, speaking up, and then finding information and getting others to come around you and come alongside of you to say, hey, we can shift this. We can. And that work helped us. And we worked in collaboration with our Fair Fines and Fees Committee. And we were able to eliminate a lot of those things. And because we saw that they were targeted in those communities, and we're running it looking like, it looks like now some of the preliminary numbers about those things with on the buses and stuff like that, it seems like the same kind of pattern is happening. And so one of the things too is, and I know we don't want to get too deep because it's already been litigated, but the fact that, let's talk a little bit about risk. So, so you know, Peter, you were working for a company, good job, and you would take care of your family, and you saw them doing some things that were discriminatory, just a violation of federal law, right? So it's not just like, if in fact baked into the system, and you had a choice. So help me. Let's talk through a little bit about that choice. Like what went into your thought process, especially as you, because a lot of times, and let's be very clear, some of the people who do some of the worst stuff in our communities are also some of the most powerful people, and some of the people that are very well connected, not only in things on the right, in the conservative world, but a lot of times there are people who are very well connected within our democratic, those who are support Democrats. And a lot of times, it's pretty clear, that historically the Democrats have been more supportive on issues as it relates to health equity and all that other stuff that we've been talking about. And and so what happens when you identify or you're part of something that, wait a second, here's a person that's doing something that is really problematic, but they're plugged in and connected to other people who who are quote unquote uh in alignment with some of the other things that we're talking about. So let's talk through that process of why it's so important to make those right decisions.
For sure. I think that what we're getting to are moral choices.
Yes.
And I think that we need to. So if you're, when you're, throughout the number of episodes in my life where I have been labeled as a whistleblower, which in society has such negative connotations, but should not,
Right.
should not. Nobody becomes a whistleblower to get famous. That is not why you do this.
Hmm.
There are very, very serious consequences to taking that type of an approach and position and taking a stand on topics. And that's really at the heart of this matter. And no organization that I've worked with has been um, better at communicating the realities and the risks than this national organization called PEER, Public Employees for Environmental Responsibility. Their website is peer.org. They are a pure, well intentioned, incredible enterprise that I went to for help when I was in Washington, D.C. as an employee at the U.S. General Services Administration and encountered some challenges and have subsequently been advisors to me throughout my career. The message they send home, which by the way, there's a great book. It's The Art of Anonymous Activism. It's free online. You can access it. And it conveys how to solve these problems without coming out publicly, without subjecting yourselves to the risk. But I sat down with Jeff Rook, who at the time was the executive director of this organization, and he ran down the very serious consequences that I could face by coming out publicly with this. He said, "You're coming to me with a very clear dilemma, a very serious issue. You've got to understand that you're early in your career. At the time, I didn't have a family, but
Hmm.
this could just destroy me and my future. Today, I think about that family. I have a daughter, my spouse. I have a responsibility. I have a home. These are all things that can be taken away by making that moral decision. And I think what scares people into inaction. And so Peer teaches this art of anonymous activism approach. And it is about leveraging the media, leveraging the public uh, communications and using organizations and other people to build a coalition to change the narrative. And if you become the target, which in the speed camera issue, for example, I was not intending to do this, but instead of addressing the issue, the mayor went on television the very next day and was attacking me
Hmm.
personally,
Hmm.
trying to discredit my qualifications
Hmm.
instead of addressing the issue at hand, which was a clearly discriminatory, um, punitive practice for traffic enforcement. And I immediately turned to that guide and worked with the Fair Fines and Fees Coalition, an incredible organization, and made up a very, very dedicated, thoughtful leaders in our community. And we kind of turned the tables. And it wasn't just Peter coming forward, it's this whole organization coming forward. And here's what we're about. And this is why this is a big issue. And working with our common council members and bringing them along and supporting them and drafting legislation for them and creating the appearance and then reality of a movement and not just a single person taking an action.
Hmm.
So we talk about these moral choices. Certainly, if you encounter a situation where something is absolutely wrong and needs to be addressed, and you know that something needs to be done, there's incredible risk on you. There's no question that there are good people on. I hate to. I don't mean to at all to quote our former and future president, but there are good people on both
Right,
sides
right, right.
because there are bad people on both sides.
Absolutely.
Absolutely,
Right, right,
100%.
right,
And you don't know who you can trust.
right, right.
And sometimes the people you confide in end up being absolutely the wrong people
Absolutely.
and they will hurt you. And that is why building a coalition, not being silent about it, having trusted advisors, and being willing to talk ends up turning into a safety net for you.
Right, right.
So you're not making this moral decision on your own. You need to consult your family for sure.
For sure.
And on a couple of earlier, there were times when family was like, say nothing.
Right, right. Well, yeah. I mean, there's a reality of protecting your own self-interest. That's something that people have to deal with it on a day-to-day basis, right? But living in a society where there's I mean, it's documented the levels of discrimination and injustice and oppression that is causing, from our perspective, some of these ridiculously, outrageously large health disparities that we see within our society. You think about education, when you think about income, when you think about housing, these numbers that we see that are so dramatically different in terms of outcomes between people in the African American community and those outside the African American community. Those are results of systems. Those are results of unjust systems. And but the systems, they operate with people, and they're people within these systems, and that there's some that have bad intentions and what have you, but most people have good intentions. But the problem is that people will sit back and just allow for things to happen out of fear of retribution, which is a legitimate fear. So I'm not sitting up here telling y'all, hey, if you see, it's easy to say, if you see something, say something. Understand though, if you say something, there may be consequence, right? But then you got to think about the consequence of not saying anything. Dr. King, when he was always talking about the uh, the Good Samaritan story, in the paraphrase, he says, it's really not about what will happen to you if you do say something or if you do get engaged. It's what's going to happen to the person who's laying on the road if you don't say something. So in Peter's case, with the things that relate to the housing state, and you can look this all up, just Google it, because we're not going to spend the time. This has been already litigated. Um, all the actors, they're all named out there. We're not going to name them here, but just Google it. You'll see it. Look through the thing. And if in fact these practices which were happening within this company, a company that was getting a lot of government and federal and public dollars to do work, if that company would have been able to continue to operate in a way which was discriminatory, then the folks who were victimized by this, what would happen to them? Right? And so Peter had a choice. He said, well, wait a second. I know what might happen to me if I speak up on this, but the bigger question is, what will happen to those who are being hurt and harmed by what is happening? And so as we seek to bring health equity into our community, it's going to require levels of activism and advocacy that is going to that requires us to challenge systems that are operating unjustly, and the coalition that has to be built and is being built are those who are witnesses. Those, people talk a lot about unjust practices in the school system or in a hospital or whatever, and yes, that these things are happening on a day-to-day basis. And so they have to we have to start bringing our conversations from the barbershop, from the beauty salon, from texting one another, to there has to be, at some level, if we want to have real change, there has to be official, on the record, boom, this is what I know, this is what I've seen, this is what I've experienced, and it is wrong. And if I have to deal with the consequence of me speaking the truth, I'm willing to do that. But if you do that as part of a community, as part of a collective, as part of people who will have your back, right? And so you might not think that you got people that will have your back, but in fact, if you build that kind of relationships with one another, because if you see something wrong, you're not the only one that's seen it, right? And so sometimes, if you're the whistleblower or the person that begins to speak truth to power, as they say, then you'll find others that will come up around you and say, yeah, I know, I saw that too, right? And so but at some point there has to be a moral choice that we make, and Peter made those choices, and because he made those choices, you know, veterans are going to be helped. Because he made those choices, uh, companies that have been operating with racist housing policies within their organization, they've been checked, right? And folks said, no, we're not. We're not okay with that. And so and because he spoke up around the cameras and other things, these he was able to connect with a coalition of really strong folks that were saying, yeah, we know that too. And now we have the data and information to prove our point. So we're entering into another uh part of the American journey, uh, that has a lot of people a lot are really afraid right now. And I understand that fear, but um, we can't let fear silence us. We can't let fear uh, cause us to be complicit with injustice. And so, my rationale and reasoning and thought process behind bringing Peter on today was to encourage folks, because to speak up is a sense it's an act of optimism. People, it's heroic, it's courageous, but it's also optimistic because it's a belief that by speaking truth, the things that are happening that are unjust and harmful to others can change, right? So nobody's going to, no one's going to get engaged in speaking up against systems if you just believe that it ain't going to change nothing. You have to change your thought process. You have to change your thinking to know that, people use the Rosa Parks and just thing. Rosa Parks made a conscious decision to do what she did because there was a belief that by what she was doing was going to somehow, some way, gonna bring change. She interrupted. She broke the cycle of injustice by stepping up. And so there's a lot of injustice in our society. There's a lot that's going wrong, but there are more good people out there. And so my call to you today, my encouragement to you today is to look within the inner human, the inner man, the inner woman, and when you see something that is harmful and unjust, and if you, by being a witness, by speaking to those things, if you believe that it can change something, and you got to believe it can change something, you got to believe it got to change something. um, then let's start speaking up. Let's start stepping up so that we can begin to start bringing the systemic changes that is so desperately needed. I don't know about you, but when I look at these health statistics in the community, when I see the outcomes, when I talk to people, when I do the funerals, whatever, I don't know about you, but I'm tired of it, right? And I refuse to believe, right, that this is our destiny as human beings in this society. I refuse to believe that unjust systems are just something that we have to accept and just figure out our way to get through. No, we have the power of the voice, the power of collectivity, work being collective. We have a moral responsibility, but with that moral responsibility, there comes some power, some authority that you have. Um, and so I just wanted to bring Peter on today to show you that, yeah, I mean, there's a price he paid, but beyond what he lost, he gained much more. And and so, Peter, I wanted to just share with you, through these there's been some ups and downs on your journey because you've spoken up. But now, where have you landed, and what is the work that you're doing right now? And we'll close out with that.
Sure. I am so grateful today to be involved with uh, an organization that is dedicated to stewardship of every segment of our society. It's the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, where I am the Director of Construction Initiatives. So, the construction industry has many millions of people across the country who are incredibly hardworking and dedicated to their various crafts. And unfortunately, it has that specific employment sector has the second highest rate of suicide of any employment sector in the United States.
Mm,
Every 90 minutes, about 15 to 16 people a day in that industry take their life.
mm.
And my job is to help identify what is the problem and how do we solve it. Specifically, rolling out programs, developing programs, working with major construction firms as well as small companies across the United States to help address this issue, solve it. It's not only a mental health challenge, but there are also social determinants to
Oh, no
suicide
doubt, no doubt.
that of course have to be addressed, and it touches every segment
Mhm.
of our society. And I can't say enough great things about this organization. They are truly pure at heart and are actually making a major difference nationwide.
So, so another thing that address, around suicide again is this breaking that silence, man. You know, silence. There's the silence of contemplation that's so important in our spiritual journeys, and then there's the time when we must break silence and lift our voices, share our stories that can help us for our healing. Um, you know, there's so much trauma that we've experienced within our communities, and and so many people are struggling. They're struggling, and so Peter, we're grateful that you landed with this American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. It's a national organization. And then I didn't know that there was such high rates of suicide for those in the construction industry. Um, and so, you know, if your heart is pure and if you're really trying to do the right thing, good work will find you, and will create opportunities and spaces for you to do the things to not only take care of your family and that's important, but also contribute to our society. So, Peter, I want to say thank you for joining us today on our Igniting Hope podcast. Um, I would encourage folks to Google Peter's story, Peter Rizzo. It's all really documented about exactly. He's very humble to document why he received these awards and received these recognitions. And as a friend, and I consider Peter a friend, I know of some of the heartache and pain and pressure that he had to deal with and continues to deal with because of some of the choices that he made to speak up for those who could not speak for themselves. And that's one of our challenges. And to leave on a really high note, one of the things that, and we're going to have people come on future Igniting Hope podcasts, is, as we recall, we started our journey. One of our places we've connected many places with the St. Luke's mission, and my testimony of breaking the silence was as the folks on the St. Luke's mission team who had a wonderful and have a wonderful vision about creating this community center, and sitting in that room and not feeling comfortable with the process, not because it was an unjust process, but it was a process that needed something else. And you could share a little bit about me speaking up and me breaking the silence and how the outcomes and what's the outcomes of that.
Absolutely. It was a transformative moment in this project, which is known as Build Promise. And essentially, St. Luke's was founded in 1994 by my cousin Norm Pellini and Amy Bitros, who was a close friend of his. And it is dedicated to serving the people of Buffalo and of Erie County and Western New York as a whole. We do not take your zip code. Anyone who needs support and service is welcome at St. Luke's. They also take no government money, and they take no money from the Diocese of Buffalo, although they operate out of a church property that they own outright. Um, their their goal in this Build Promise project is to create a shelter for homeless men in our community, which predominantly the homeless population is predominantly male, but also to provide them with access to the social services that they desperately need. We we can Any one of us can find ourselves homeless. It's as simple as missing a payment
Mhm.
on your rent, and it's not just the folks that we see out on the street or asking for money at the corner. It affects so many people. And even if you have a home, you may not have enough to get by. And so St. Luke's provides hundreds of meals a day to the people of our community. So this project involved building a 22,000 square foot facility right across from St. Luke's main property, across the street on Sycamore. And we we had just hired a new director of our project, and we're trying to really get a hold and reframe how this thing is going to move forward, because we need to raise a lot of money very quickly because we have a very high demand for it. And so we created a committee of community members, and I asked you to join that. And we brought everyone together. We showed everyone the plans. We were meeting in the sanctuary of the church, and your hand goes up right away,
Mhm.
and you're called on, and immediately change the course of this project from top to bottom. What you said is we need to rethink how we're going to execute this job. There is incredible value of having that 22,000 square foot building in this neighborhood. No doubt about it. The services that you're going to provide are of value to us, no doubt, and to society at large. But the journey to get there is what's important. And that journey should involve the people in this community. So, what can we do to ensure that our neighbors are the ones actually building this structure? What can we do to equip them with the skills and the tools that they need to get experience on this job and then take that experience? It's teaching a man to fish, is what it
Mhm.
is. And again, that moment charted a course that I don't think anyone in that room at the time could have anticipated. Um, Stuart Harper, our director, took that to heart and immediately began building the social entrepreneurship program, where we're partnering with various organizations in our community to get folks
Mhm.
equipped with the training they
Right.
need to be on site
Right.
so that
Someone Six Ministries
you
is
got
doing
it,
great work. Yeah.
absolutely, and a close partner with us to equip folks with the safety skills they needed to be on site.
Mhm.
And then Lehigh Construction working with
Right.
their subcontractors
Mhm.
and making a commitment to bringing folks on site who've never worked on construction
Yeah.
projects before, or have and just don't have experience in the United States, and allowing them to cut their teeth on this job.
Mhm.
And today we have a structure that is almost nearly fully funded.
Yes.
It is um, well under construction. The building
Yeah.
envelope, the brick
Yeah.
is going
Put
up.
the roof on.
The roof is
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
It is it's a sight to behold
Right.
and something to be very proud of. And it was built by the people of this
Right.
community.
Yeah. So the initial call, I think they got ahead 23 people that were entered into the program, and 19 have successfully completed the program and are working. They got their tools, and a few folks have not. A few of that cohort have actually gotten additional work with the contractor on projects that will go beyond this work. And so these 19 people, and the other 4 or 5, they were life happens, right? And there's still connection with the 716 Ministries, and we're going to continue to work with them. But these 19 people, they're they are going to be able to begin to start, because of this project, begin to start charting a new life for themselves, right? Where they have skills, they got experience, they got the tools, they're working on this job, they get the income, and they're going to work on other jobs. And so it can happen. So we got to speak up. We got to believe things can happen. We got to take actions that need to be taken so that we can bring real change. So I want to leave us with that. This is Pastor George Nicholas with Peter Rizzo, who is the Director of Construction Initiatives for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, and the recent winner, or the recognition of the Outstanding Public Servant from the United States Office of Special Counsel for the whole United States of America, and a proud resident of the city of Buffalo, a contributing resident to this community. And so we're excited about where we're going in 2025. Please log on to our website, buffalohealthequity.org, buffalohealthequity.org, to view this podcast, to view past podcasts. I want to send a special thank you to our producer, Brother Sherman Middlebrooks, and everybody knows Sherman. And just go on to our website; you'll see him up there. And if you have ideas, or if you're doing something, because this is a public platform, this ain't the George Nicholas show. This is a public platform, and we want to use this platform to help elevate our community. So you can go on to our website. There's a way, I believe, Sherman, where people can connect with us through the website. If you have podcast ideas, if you have a story that you want to share with us, please let us know. And we'd love to hear your story. It's got to be about elevating and uplifting us as a people and as a community. It's got to be about helping us get to the point of health equity. It's got to be about making our society and our community a better place to live. Uh, so at that, I'll sign off and let you know that we love you. Everything that we do here at the Buffalo Center for Health Equity is driven by our love of ourselves, our love of our community, and our love of you. So this is Pastor George Nicholas signing off for our Igniting Hope podcast. Thank you. That was 1 hour and 2 minutes.